The moment I realized my marriage was a lie, I was standing in the middle of a room full of people who were clapping for me. It was the opening night of the Harlow Interiors annual showcase, the event I had spent 4 months planning, the one my boss called the most polished presentation this firm has ever put together. My name was on the program, my designs were on the walls, and my husband was somewhere in that building because I had personally invited him, texted him the address twice, and told him to arrive by 7. At 7:23, my phone buzzed. Running late from the office. "So proud of you, babe. Save me a glass of the good stuff." I smiled at the message. I actually smiled. Then I slipped my phone back into my clutch and walked toward the East Gallery to check on the lighting. That is when I saw him. He was standing near the floor-to-ceiling window at the far end of the room, the one that overlooked the river. The city lights were reflecting off the glass. He had his back half turned to me, one hand resting low on the back of a woman in a green dress. Not resting casually the way you rest your hand on a colleague's back, the other kind. The kind that means something. I stopped walking. The woman turned her head and laughed at something he said, and my husband leaned in and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. Slow, deliberate, the way you touch someone you have touched 1,000 times before. My chest went cold. I stood there for what felt like a full minute. The applause from the main hall drifted through the walls. Someone across the room was talking about my work, saying something about architectural storytelling and spatial poetry, and I was standing completely still, watching my husband tuck another woman's hair behind her ear at my own event. Then he reached into his jacket pocket, and I heard the faint buzz of his phone, my phone, lighting up in my clutch at the exact same second. Running late from the office. "So proud of you, babe." He had sent that message while standing 15 feet away from me. I did not walk over to him. I do not know where that instinct came from, but something in me went very quiet and very still, the way everything goes quiet right before something breaks. I turned around. I walked back into the main hall. I picked up a glass of wine from the nearest tray. I smiled at my boss when she caught my eye across the room, and I did not look in the direction of the East Gallery for the rest of the night. My husband found me near the entrance at 9 o'clock. He kissed my cheek and told me the event looked incredible. He smelled like the same cologne he always wore. His hand was warm on my waist. He asked if I wanted to share a cab home, and I said yes. And during the entire ride, I sat with my hands folded in my lap and looked out the window and thought about the green dress. I did not sleep that night. My name is Claire. I am 31 years old, and at that point in my life, I had been married for 3 years to a man I had known for 6. We met when I was in graduate school. He was finishing his 2nd year at a law firm downtown, confident in the way that men are when they have just figured out they are good at something. I was 25, working 60-hour weeks on a thesis about adaptive reuse in post-industrial spaces, and I thought I had found someone who actually understood what I was building toward. We got married in October. Small ceremony, his family and mine, a restored barn outside of Asheville. My best friend stood next to me at the altar. She had been my best friend since the first week of college. 14 years of shared apartments, shared secrets, shared everything. She was the person I called when my father had his heart surgery. She was the first person I told when my husband proposed. At our wedding, she gave a toast that made half the room cry. I am telling you this because I need you to understand exactly how much I trusted both of them before I tell you what they did. The morning after the showcase, I told my husband I had a headache and stayed in bed until he left for work. Then I got up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I went back through 6 months of our bank statements. I am an architect. I am trained to look at a structure and find the places where the weight is not distributed correctly, where the stress is accumulating in ways that will eventually cause failure. I apply that same logic to problems I cannot solve emotionally. When I do not know what to feel, I look for the data. It took me 2 hours to find the first anomaly, a recurring charge once a month to a property management company I did not recognize. Not enormous, $450, but steady, 8 months in a row. He had always managed our shared account. I handled our individual expenses. I had never looked closely. Why would I? I wrote down the name of the property management company on a notepad. Then I kept looking. By noon, I had found 3 more things that did not fit. A dinner receipt from a restaurant I'd never been to, dated on a Tuesday night when he told me he was at a client dinner. Which, fine, but the charge was for 2 people and included a bottle of wine that cost more than our weekly groceries, a Venmo payment to an account labeled only with initials, a charge to a jewelry store I had never seen anything come home from. I closed the laptop. I sat very still. Then I picked up my phone and called the one person I always called when I needed to think clearly. My best friend picked up on the second ring. "Hey, I was just thinking about you," she said. "Last night looked amazing. I saw the photos you posted. Can you meet me for lunch?" I said. There was a small pause, maybe half a second. I would think about that pause later. "Of course," she said. 1 o'clock? The usual place? She looked exactly the same as she always did. That is what I kept thinking while we sat across from each other at our corner table. She had ordered the same salad she always ordered. She was wearing the earrings I had helped her pick out at a flea market 3 years ago. She was my best friend, 14 years, and she looked completely normal. I did not tell her what I had found. I do not know why, except that same quiet instinct from the night before was still operating somewhere underneath my conscious mind, collecting information before revealing itself. I told her the event had gone well. She told me about a difficult client she was dealing with at her PR firm. We split a piece of cake for dessert the way we always did. She hugged me at the door and told me to call her that weekend. I watched her walk to her car. Then I drove home and sat in the driveway for a long time. The thing about not confronting someone immediately is that it gives you time to be wrong. I spent the next week telling myself I was wrong. The woman at the showcase was a colleague. The property management charge was something he had forgotten to mention. The jewelry receipt was for his mother's birthday. I constructed a version of events that allowed everything to be fine, and I held on to it the way you hold on to a wall when the floor is unsteady. Then he forwarded me an email by mistake. It was a Wednesday. He was at the office. I was working from home. My phone buzzed with a notification, a forwarded email from his personal account to mine, the kind of accidental forward that happens when someone is typing quickly and autocomplete fills in the wrong name. His account and mine have similar email addresses. We had laughed about it before. He was always careful. That morning, he was not careful. The email was a thread. At the top, his forwarded message to what I assume was meant to be a different address. See below. She doesn't know yet. Keep it that way until the paperwork is done. Below that, a message from his address to my best friend's email. I read the thread 3 times. Then I put my phone face down on the desk and sat with my hands pressed flat against my thighs and breathed very slowly for approximately 4 minutes. The thread was about me, not in the way I had feared. Not simply the 2 of them discussing an affair. It was worse than that. My husband had spent the better part of the year working with a corporate attorney to restructure how our shared assets were classified. When I started at Harlow Interiors 7 years ago, I had been given a small equity stake, 2%, which had grown considerably as the firm expanded. He had been quietly researching how to access that stake, whether through a postnuptial agreement or through a clause he claimed was already embedded in a contract I had signed early in our marriage. My best friend worked in PR, but she had also spent 4 years before that working at a financial consulting firm, and she had contacts my husband did not. She had been helping him build a paper trail, communications routed through her office so they would not appear on his firm's servers, research on asset transfer law, a document she had drafted and described in the thread as the clean version, a postnuptial agreement that had been quietly modified to include a clause I had never agreed to. He was planning to have me sign it. The plan, from what I could piece together through the thread, was to wait until a moment when I was distracted, or, more precisely, a moment when I had been made to feel emotionally unstable and desperate for reassurance. He would present it as a routine financial planning document. My best friend had apparently offered to be present as a supportive witness. I sat at that desk for a long time. I thought about how many times over the past year I had felt off balance without being able to explain it. The small comments he made about my memory being unreliable, the times he had gently suggested I was overreacting to things I was not overreacting to, the way my best friend had, on more than one occasion, agreed with him when I brought her concerns to her. I had thought she was being balanced. I had trusted her perspective because I trusted her perspective because I trusted her. She had been calibrating me, slowly, carefully, in coordination with him, not with a drug, with words. I did not cry. I am telling you this, not to make myself sound stronger than I was, but because it is true. I had no tears left for the version of this story I had been quietly writing in my head for the past week. The one I was now reading was different. It required different tools. I forwarded the email thread to a folder I labeled simply reference. Then I called an attorney. Her name was Patricia, and she had been recommended by a colleague of mine whose divorce had been, in her words, the most organized thing I have ever survived. Patricia was 62 years old. She wore her silver haircut close to her head, and when I sat across from her desk and laid out what I'd found, she did not blink. "Do you have the email?" she asked. "Yes." "Do you have access to the bank statements you described?" "Yes." "Good," she said. "Don't touch anything. Don't confront either of them. Don't change your behavior in any way. I need 2 weeks." I asked her what she needed 2 weeks for. "To make sure," she said, "that when this is over, you have everything." Those 2 weeks were the strangest of my life. I went to work. I came home. I cooked dinner and asked my husband about his day and listened while he talked about a case he was working on. On Saturday, I had lunch with my best friend. She had called to check in, warm and familiar, and I sat across from her at our corner table and asked about her week, and laughed at her stories and did not let a single thing show on my face. I had been told my whole life that I was too emotional, too reactive, too much. I had believed it, on some level. I had softened myself around both of them, let their assessments of me become part of how I understood myself. Sitting at that table, watching my best friend talk about her weekend plans, I thought, I was never too much. I was exactly right. They just needed me smaller. Patricia called me on a Thursday afternoon, 14 days after our first meeting. "The post-nuptial document has a problem," she said. "The clause he's trying to enforce relates to a contract you signed in the early years of your marriage. He's been arguing that clause constitutes a pre-existing agreement. But the contract was for a different purpose entirely, and it was never notarized in the way required for asset transfer under state law. His attorney either knows this and is hoping you won't catch it, or they missed it. Either way, it doesn't hold." "What about the equity stake?" I asked. "Untouchable," she said. "It was established prior to your marriage and was never folded into shared assets. He has no claim to it." I exhaled slowly. "There's more," she said. "The property management charges you flagged. I had a contact pull the lease records. He has been paying month to month on an apartment across town. It's in his name only." "The woman you described from the event?" "I can't confirm that, but the lease started 8 months ago, which aligns with your records." "What do I do now?" I asked. "Now," Patricia said, "we let him bring you the document. He brought it on a Sunday evening. He had set the scene carefully. Wine, a quiet dinner, the kind of soft domestic atmosphere designed to make everything feel safe and low stakes. After we cleared the dishes, he reached into his laptop bag and placed a folder on the table. "I've been working with a financial planner," he said, "and they suggested we get some updated paperwork in order. Just routine stuff, protecting both of us." He slid the folder toward me. I opened it. I read the first 2 pages slowly, the way someone reads something for the first time. I turned to the 3rd page, where the problematic clause was embedded, 4 paragraphs down, in language designed to look like standard boilerplate. I looked up at him. "I'd like to have my attorney review this before I sign anything," I said. His expression shifted, just slightly. "It's really just routine." "I'm sure it is," I said, "but I'd feel better having someone look it over." "You understand," he said, of course. He picked up his wine glass. His hand was steady, but his jaw was tight, and I watched him recalibrate in real time, deciding what his next move was. He never got to make it. Patricia filed the following Tuesday. Not a petition for review of the document, a full filing including the email thread, the bank statements, the lease records, and a detailed account of the coordinated effort to manipulate me into signing away assets under false pretenses. The legal terms were fraud, coercion, and, because my best friend had prepared and distributed documents intended to deceive, civil conspiracy. His firm was notified the same morning the filing hit. Attorneys at his level do not survive fraud allegations, and by Thursday he had been placed on administrative leave pending internal review. My best friend called me that afternoon. I did not answer. She called 3 more times. On the 4th call, I picked up and said simply, "I know everything," and then I hung up and blocked her number. The divorce was finalized 7 months later. He retained a private attorney, not from his former firm, and spent the first 2 months trying to negotiate. Patricia was unmovable. The lease records established the affair. The email thread established the conspiracy. The financial documents established the fraud. There was very little room to negotiate from a position of nothing. In the final settlement, I kept the equity stake. I kept the apartment we had shared. He moved out within 30 days of the filing. I kept the joint savings account, minus his premarital contributions, which had been clearly documented. He agreed to the terms because the alternative was a civil trial that would have been significantly more damaging. My best friend was named in the civil conspiracy claim. Her attorney reached out to Patricia early in the process, and she ultimately settled separately. A financial agreement I will not detail here, except to say that it was adequate. She lost 2 major clients at her PR firm within the month after the filing became a matter of record. I did not cause that. I did not have to. I was told later by Patricia that the forwarded email, the mistake, the half-second of carelessness, was what made the entire case possible. Without it, I would have had suspicions and bank records, and a story I could not fully prove. With it, I had their own words, in their own voices, laying out exactly what they had planned. He had been so careful for so long. One morning, he was not careful. There is a certain kind of grief that does not look like grief from the outside. It looks like organization. It looks like phone calls and folders and very steady handwriting on legal documents. It looks like sitting across from your attorney and answering questions clearly, while inside you are slowly understanding the full shape of what has been done to you. I grieved on my own timeline. I am still grieving in the way that you grieve any long-term loss, not all at once, but in small recurring waves that surprise you at odd moments. A song, a coffee shop we used to go to, the particular way the city looks from the East Gallery of the Harlow Building on a clear night when the river is reflecting the lights. I have not been back to that gallery since the showcase. I go to work every day. I am still at Harlow Interiors. My equity stake is intact, and last year I was promoted to lead designer on our largest project to date. My office now has a window that faces west. In the afternoon, when the light comes in at a low angle, it fills the whole room. I think about what I would tell a younger version of myself, the one who spent years softening her voice and second-guessing her instincts because the 2 people she trusted most had quietly taught her that her perception could not be relied upon. I would tell her, your instincts were right every time. The night of the showcase, something in me went very quiet and very still when it needed to. It did not react. It did not perform. It collected information and waited for the right moment and held everything together long enough to build an airtight case out of the tools she had. That is not cold. That is not unfeeling. That is what it looks like when a woman finally stops being small.